Good night, Winchester. This is Late Nights with Lance, Winchester, Virginia's favorite late night talk show. I'm your host, Lance Gunner Wines, and I have a pretty good show planned for tonight. We're actually going to attempt our very first planned episode. I can't call it scripted because I didn't plan that hard, but this is going to be a rundown of my top 20 most anticipated films of 2021. Something that I intended to work on last month, but because of the Trump insurrection and because of my crippling depression and anxiety and preparing for the bar exam in a couple of weeks, I've put it off because that's, just what happens. Tonight we're going to go through my top 20 most anticipated films of this new year. Some of the films may have already been released. Some of them may actually end up being pushed back yet again. But this list was made on New Year's, ringing in the new year of 2021. So I don't know what's happened in the last month where films may have been pushed back, but hopefully all these films are set to be released this year. Now, I understand that not a lot of people are going to be going to movie theaters again this year, myself included. I can't even remember the last film that I saw in theaters. I feel like it had to have been The Rise of Skywalker, the best Star Wars movie, of course, the very best. Nobody really wants to go to a theater filled with sticky seats and overpriced popcorn and coronavirus. But hopefully, sometime later this year, theaters will open back up. We'll have some sort of normalcy, and we'll get to enjoy some of these films the way that they were intended when they were shot. Of course, it may be the case that we don't get to go to theaters at all this year. And so in that case, maybe when you're ringing in the new year of 2022, you'll look back on this list and think, man, Lance really put a great list of films out there, and I'll have to go back and watch all of them. And if that's the case, I'll expect some sort of gratitude for that. But yeah, this is our very first attempt at a put together episode that's not just me ranting about being sad or lonely or upset at the state of the world. The planned layout before we go into break, to split this episode up, we're going to go in groups of 5. So I'm going to start with number 20. So of the top 20, that's going to be the least anticipated, and work our way up. So it'll be 20 through 16, 15 through 11, 10 through 6, and then 5 up to 1, with 1 being my most anticipated film of the upcoming year. So I hope that everyone enjoys this. And yeah, it should be a good one. I can't wait to cut and mix this. I wish that you guys could be here in the studio that I made up of an ottoman and a bar stool and an old record player and a blue LED light. I feel like I'm in like Howard Stern or Larry King or Jimmy Fallon's studio. But yeah, we're going to get a move on. This is probably going to be another long episode. So for everyone listening who always rags me about the long episodes, Alex Camacho, I apologize. So yeah, thanks for having me. This is Late Nights with Lance. We'll be back in a sec. All right, and we're back. So I'm not really sure how to go about this in terms of the information that I'm going to provide. But again, I'm just running through these episodes or these films in order, and I'm using Wikipedia, obviously, to provide my information because Wikipedia is a reliable source. Don't let any college professor tell you otherwise. And I'm just going to, give the name of the film, a brief rundown of what it's about or what I think it's about, and then some notable cast or something that I think is important that puts it on this list. So first, to many a surprise, my number 20 of the most anticipated films of 2021 is Peter Rabbit 2, The Runaway. So yeah, I'm sure that everyone's like, really? A kid's movie? As I said in the first episode, I'm childish, and I love kids' movies and animation, and I grew up with Peter Rabbit. It was one of the stories that my mother used to read with me and that my grandmother used to read with me. My mother was always a big fan of Beatrix Potter. She was probably read those books when she was young, and then she passed that on to me. The first film was great. It was a very cutesy, depiction of Peter Rabbit with modern animation. It featured Dave Matthews Band, which was kind of crazy. They had this big animal party inside of the house, of the farmhouse, and they were playing, I think it was Crash Into Me, honestly. It was like a romantic dance between these farm animals. And they played, I'm pretty sure, Crash Into Me by the Dave Matthews Band, which was clever. So this film is set to be directed by a Mr. Will Gluck. I don't know if I'm going to always say who the directors are, but I feel like if your name is Gluck, I kind of have to say it. You know what I mean? So yeah, continuing with the list or with the cast, Peter Rabbit is voiced by James Corden, which is, a very fitting voice, I think, for Peter Rabbit. I don't know if anyone really has a voice in their head of what he would sound like, but yeah. Moving on, Flopsy Rabbit is voiced by Margot Robbie. So, Margot Robbie is Harley Quinn. You may know her from, what was that, I, Tonya? As well as, I mostly accredit her with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. So Margot Robbie will be playing Flopsy. And then Cottontail in the first film, I should say, was voiced by Daisy Ridley, who was one of my celebrity crushes. Everyone close to me knows that I am madly in love with Daisy Ridley, especially with her portrayal of Rey in the sequel trilogy of Star Wars. I think that Rey is probably my favorite character next to Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ben Skywalker, or I guess Ben Solo, Kylo Ren. But apparently Daisy Ridley is not voicing Cottontail in this film. I assume because of scheduling conflict, likely due to Star Wars. Moving on, this film is set to release in the United Kingdom, where I think most of it is based, on February 12th of this year. So that's coming up. I guess today is February 10th. Holy crap. Man, this year has gone by already. But this film will set to be released in the United States on June 11th, 2021. I believe that it has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, but I'm not really sure. It was probably originally set to be released in February here as well, but because the United States is kind of behind the rest of the world in terms of responding to the pandemic, they probably pushed that back. But yeah, that's our first film on the list. Number 20 is Peter Rabbit 2, The Runaway. Moving on, number 19. I don't know how much time I'm going to spend on these. Again, I'm just going down the list. I'll probably cut it up a little bit. But yeah, moving on, number 19 is the film Last Night in Soho. Apparently, I don't know how this really made my list, aside from giving credit to a close friend of mine, Hunter Cutlip. So Hunter is a huge fan of the director Edgar Wright. I mean, he loves his films. We're both kind of film nerds, film geeks, but he's a huge fan. And I don't know if I'd necessarily say that I'm a big fan of Edgar Wright, but I'm a very big fan of one of Edgar's movies, and that is Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I absolutely love Scott Pilgrim. I think that the cast is outstanding. And I think that the writing, the animations that they put in to make it look like a comic book in different senses, and just the story I really identify with, which is probably not a good thing. Maybe, I don't know. It depends what part I guess I identify with. But it's definitely a relatable film to someone like me, a 25-year-old bachelor, and then the different girls that he is attracted to, the different women, especially, Ramona Flowers. And I really think that it's a good conversation piece starting the conversation about the sort of manic pixie dream girl trope, and how that is not only prevalent in film and film created by male creators, but also how it's very popular in the real world, and how misogyny sort of creates these unrealistic expectations of women, and how that's a whole different conversation. The point is, Edgar Wright did an amazing job with Scott Pilgrim, and because we were in that conversation and that anniversary happened this past year, Hunter was like, "Hey, this director has a new film coming out, and it should be interesting," and I trust him. Uh, that's pretty much it. I don't know much about the cast. Looking at the names, I don't really recognize these people. Anya Taylor-Joy is set to be the protagonist, and the premise is that a young girl who is passionate about fashion design mysteriously enters the 1960s, where she encounters her idol, a dazzling wannabe singer. But 1960s London is not what it seems, and time seems to fall apart with shady consequences. Sounds dope. Sounds dope to me. It is marqued as a psychological horror film, which is neat. I'm excited to see some sort of interpretation of London in the 1960s and that free love period, which was very prevalent in that London, United Kingdom culture. And yeah, I mean, I don't know why the first thing that I thought of was Austin Powers. I doubt that he's going to be making an appearance, but that's sort of the era that we're going to see. It should be cool. This film is set to release on October 22nd of 2021. It will be released here in the United States and, of course, in the United Kingdom, which is cool to have a timepiece horror film released around Halloween. So it's going to be a Halloween release. It's going to be great, and I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see what Edgar Wright puts out, if he has some sort of style that I haven't really noticed yet or that I haven't been put onto. So yeah, we're going to move on from there. So what was that, number 19? So number 18 on my list is a film that is actually, it was released originally on September 11th of 2020, but I think that was strictly for a film festival, and it will be released on the big market. Apparently it was already released. Sorry, I'm looking at the date. I can't believe it's February. Anyway, number 18 on my list is the film Nomadland. It's called Nomadland. It's all one word, kind of like Zombieland, but I assume nothing like that. It's based on a book called Nomadland: Surviving America in the 21st Century by Jessica Bruder. And the title alone seems interesting. The release date, the original release date of September 11th, 2020, sort of, going back to the title of Surviving America in the 21st Century, that seems like it was probably planned. But this film, apparently, I'm just going to read the brief rundown on Wikipedia, is an American neo-Western drama, directed, written, edited, and produced by Chloe Zhao. It is based on the 2017 book of the same name. And let's see if it has anything about the actual film itself. Let's see. All right. Well, the film apparently takes place in 2011, and they have a long plot description, but what I'm getting from it is that it looks like it's about a young woman who, I guess, is surviving in the West, and the neo-Western drama, surviving in the West in the United States in the last decade. And everyone listening has survived the last decade, thank God. So we understand sort of the trials and tribulations associated with that. It just looks like a very artistic film. It looks like it's very well made, very in depth. Of course, I haven't read the book, but if it's anything like Hillbilly Elegy and how that translated from the book to the film, and how that was also sort of an artistic rendition, artistic interpretation of a very modern dramatic story, I think that I'll enjoy it. It just sounds like something interesting. Like I'm not familiar with the genre of neo-western, but if you're talking about being a nomad out west and living that van life, and traveling from place to place, um, I think that that'll be an interesting thing to view. Um, it reminds me of the song. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. I'm gonna have to look it up real quick. Let's see how fast my fingers are to see what's the name of the song. Um, Sleep on the Floor. There it is. That's what, looking at the stills from this film, from the poster, the descriptions, it looks like a film version of the song by the Lumineers, "Sleep on the Floor." Beautiful song. That's what it looks like, essentially. So yeah, that's should be interesting. Apparently, it was released in the United States on January 29th of 2021. So if you have the opportunity, go watch it. And tell me how it is. So yeah, that's what was that, number 18. So all right, number 17. We're going to move on from here. Number 17 is a film that is currently being advertised. I think that the release is coming up in the United States. It might actually be today. But this film is one that I think a lot of people have seen their previews for, and I think that it is going to be one that really sticks with, the American zeitgeist. And so, yeah, number 17 on my list. And of course, this is going to be an excellent film, I already know. So the fact that it's number 17, it doesn't take away from it. It's just based off of my own personal interests. Number 17 is Judas and the Black Messiah. Yeah, that's right. Number 17 on my list of the most anticipated films of 2021 is Judas and the Black Messiah, which officially releases in the United States today, February 12th, 2021. The film is based in the late 1960s Chicago, where a petty criminal agrees to work as an informant for the FBI in order to infiltrate the Black Panther Party and take down the chairman of the Illinois chapter, Fred Hampton. Again, another period piece similar to The Last Night in Soho. This film, with what's going on in the United States, the status and sort of the reality of race relations and how that has been, ever present since the landing of the original settlers to now, and the evolution of black people in the United States. I think that this film is going to be very poignant and very significant to our culture as a country, and I think that it's going to be very popular for that reason. The film is directed by Shaka King and produced by Ryan Coogler, who, if I'm not mistaken, was the director of Black Panther. Which is a high honor in and of itself. So the cast, the star of the film, the gentleman playing Fred Hampton, who was the chairman of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, is Daniel Kaluuya. I had to make sure I pronounced that correctly. Daniel Kaluuya, who was the star of the film Get Out, and he also had a starring role in Ryan Coogler's Black Panther. It's a large ensemble. I assume from the previews and from the list that this film is predominantly people of color, which is very important in obviously representation of society, but also in film, because there is this sort of issue with film production and the entertainment industry not being representative of society. So, again, Kaluuya is an amazing actor. Get Out is one of my all-time favorite films, and to see him portray this role, this historical, biographical drama, is going to be beautiful. I'm super excited, and I can't say enough about the people who put this film together. I haven't seen the film, obviously, and I don't know the entire cast, but the people who put this together, I can tell that it's going to be a great film. So that is number 17, which I know it's hard to believe, and it's hard to move on from that. So Judas and the Black Messiah. All right, number 16 on the list before we get to our break is sort of a lighter note. And I know people are going to be like, wow, Lance, you're really more excited for this film than for Judas and the Black Messiah. And to that I say, yeah, I understand. This is more about the cast and its connections to other films on this list and other films in the past that I enjoy. So number 16 on the list is the film Jungle Cruise. It's an upcoming adventure film. And apparently, I assume it's some sort of Disney property, maybe based off of a book or something. I don't know. Okay, yes. Apparently, it's based on Jungle Cruise by Walt Disney himself. And the premise is that, set during the early 20th century, a riverboat captain named Frank takes a scientist and a brother on a mission into a jungle to find the Tree of Life, which is believed to possess healing powers. All the while, the trio must fight against dangerous wild animals in a competing German expedition. A fictional period piece. Seeing the preview, it reminded me of the film Murder on the Orient Express, which Murder on the Orient Express is probably one of my favorite films of all time. And I saw some similarities, some comparisons that I could draw, and it looked interesting. And then I saw the cast. So I'm going to run down through the cast and explain to you, I guess, why I'm excited. So the star of the film, I guess the male protagonist of the film, Frank, is portrayed by Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. Everyone has opinions about The Rock and acting, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinions, but I think if you're going to base your opinions of The Rock and his acting abilities or his acting credibility, it shouldn't be based off of his portrayal of Hobbs in the Fast and Furious franchise. That's sort of him portraying himself with fast cars and a group of friends. If you're going to judge The Rock and his acting credentials, I think that you should really take a look at the film Walking Tall, which is a remake of an older film. It came out a few years ago. The Rock was, I think, 24 or 25 maybe when he made it. That film is about a soldier returning to a home that his city has been taken over by this corrupt casino, and he attempts to essentially retake his city through both official and unofficial means. He's brutally injured, and he uses that as fuel to sort of become a vigilante almost. But it's more of a true story than a superhero story. It's actually, it's a realistic drama piece. And it's beautifully done. It's a beautiful story, and his acting is phenomenal. So yeah, I'm excited for that. The female protagonist is Emily Blunt. She's playing the scientist who I guess sought Frank's help, The Rock's help. The villain of the film is who I'm really excited to see. The villain, it just says villain, so I don't know what his character's name is. So the antagonist of this film is portrayed by Edgar Ramirez. Now, everyone go take a moment and Google search Edgar Ramirez. It's spelled how it's pronounced. Edgar Ramirez is one of the most attractive human beings I think to ever live. And every woman that I've dated since the film that I'm about to mention came out has, I forced them to watch this movie that I'm going to talk about. And they watched the movie and they were like, wow, this man is beautiful. And I agree. He also stars in another film that I'll mention where he is extremely handsome as well. But Edgar Ramirez is, to me, most notable for his portrayal of Bodhi in the 2015 remake of Point Break. And of course, it's not really a remake, but I'm not going to go into that. This isn't a Point Break podcast. Yeah, that's a good idea, though. Point Break podcast. Anyway, Edgar Ramirez portrays a Bodhi who is sort of a protagonist-antagonist at the same time. He's an eco-terrorist, and he does a lot of cool shit. And he plays the character that was originally portrayed by Patrick Swayze in the 1991 version, which featured Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves. Edgar Ramirez also stars alongside Matthew McConaughey in the film, I believe it's called Gold. I believe it's simply called Gold. I'm going to take a look at his filmography so I get this correct. Yep. So in that film, Matthew McConaughey is a modern day gold miner. He's hard up, and he gets the help of this scientist who is Edgar Ramirez. And together they, quote unquote, discover a mother lode. The actual term, a mother lode of gold. And they become these world-renowned miners. They make a lot of money. They get a lot of fame and fortune and vanity and all that cool shit. And I'm not going to spoil the story, but essentially, it doesn't really work out well for anyone. As you can imagine, money is the root of all evil. But it's a great film, and his chemistry with Matthew McConaughey is way stronger than his chemistry with the gentleman who played Johnny Utah in Point Break. And he's also known for playing Gianni Versace in the 2018 miniseries, The Assassination of Gianni Versace, which was a very popular, very critically acclaimed series. So yeah, excellent actor, and anything that he's in, I'm down for. And that's pretty much why this film tops the others. So this is, what was this, number 16 on the list, Jungle Cruise, starring The Rock, Emily Blunt, and my man Edgar Ramirez. So we're going to take a short break. I hope that you've enjoyed this so far. I've enjoyed talking about these films. And we'll be right back. And yeah, thanks for listening. All right, guys, and we're back. I know that after that riveting description of those 5 films, I'm sure you're wondering, how can anything top that on your list? And you're right. I did just spend a few minutes talking about how much I am in love with Edgar Ramirez, who I should mention before I go any further is Venezuelan. And that's important to me because my best friend, my brother, and his family, my essentially adopted siblings are Venezuelan, and that just means a lot to me. I have a lot of Venezuelan pride, even though, with everything going on there, and it's similar to what's going on here, I care for the people, and so to have a Venezuelan who is so prominent in the entertainment industry, it means a lot to me. So yeah, but anyway, we're going to move on now, so we're on film number 15. And you're probably thinking, how can you top those films? Here we go. Number 15 on my list of most anticipated films of 2021 is the film Dune. Dune is set to release on October 1st of this year with a budget of $165 million, which I'm pretty sure is the highest budget of all the films I've mentioned so far, but it is not the highest budget on the list, which is insane. So Dune is based off of I guess some sort of intellectual property, a book of sorts, by Frank Herbert. I have not seen the original films. I have not read the 1965 novel. But apparently this film is connected to films that have been made in the past. And it is the first of a planned 2-part adaptation of this book. And it'll cover essentially the first half. It has a large ensemble, which I think is where a lot of the budget is going. The ensemble as well as the effects. But I'm going to run through the cast, this ensemble, because it's impressive. The film stars Timothy Chalamet. Is that how you pronounce his name? I really don't know. He's extremely popular, especially with women my age. They find him very attractive, sort of in a way that people found a young Johnny Depp attractive. I don't know. It's just sort of a weird Edward Scissorhands vibe, which is, I'm pretty sure he played like his son in that commercial. So the film stars Timothy, And then moving on from there, these are some big names I'm going to run through. Oscar Isaac, who plays Poe Dameron in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. He plays another male protagonist. Everyone loves Oscar Isaac. I think that he is an exceptional actor as well, so that should be fun. Moving on from there, Josh Brolin, who plays Thanos in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Everyone knows my ties, my connections to the MCU, which I'll mention in great detail moving forward on this list. And Josh Brolin is a great actor as well, sort of a classic old school style actor, like a Clint Eastwood style. So that's going to be interesting to see in this film, which looks kind of like a weird space western type thing. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, I love Josh Brolin. This is going to be pretty exciting. Moving on from there, Stellan Skarsgard, who again is from the MCU. He plays Dr. Eric Selvig, who is first seen in the Thor films and then later in the Avengers. He's the one who his mind is taken over by Loki. He builds the machine that allows for the Tesseract to open the portal above Stark Tower for the Chitauri army to invade New York in the first Avengers. He is also, I believe, the father of Bill Skarsgård, who is Pennywise from the most recent adaptation of It. So that name has a lot of weight with it. And moving on from there, I know it's going to be, by the time I'm done, I think 4 MCU names in a row. So Thanos, Dr. Selvig, and then next is my man Dave Bautista, who plays Drax. I could go on all day about how much I love Dave Bautista, and how much I love Drax. You know, one of my favorite lines in the entire MCU is when he goes, "Was it Mantis? Look out!" as she is pummeled by that meteorite, or when he's invisible. Excellent. So yeah, I love Dave Bautista. And then moving on from there, you know, we've had Thanos, Dr. Selvig, Drax the Destroyer, and now we have MJ. That's right. This film also stars Zendaya. And on my list, I talked about Daisy Ridley and how much I love Daisy Ridley, but I love Zendaya. I think Zendaya is one of the most beautiful women, not even most beautiful women. She's one of the most beautiful individuals to ever live. And I'm excited to see her in something that's not, you know, necessarily Disney related or not a secondary character to a Spider-Man, a Peter Parker. But again, I don't know much about the film, so I don't know what she's going to be doing. And then last on the list, we've done the 4 MCU actors. We're going to move on to the DC Extended Universe. And this film also stars Jason Momoa, who everyone knows as Aquaman. And I just watched Aquaman the other night with my mom. It is probably, definitely my favorite film in the DC film series. Of course, I'm excited for the Snyder Cut of Justice League, and I'm excited for the Suicide Squad, which I'll mention in this segment. But, you know, I don't know if Aquaman necessarily tested Jason Momoa's acting credentials as much as it allowed him to be himself. And I think that that's great. Yeah, I could talk about him for a long time, but I'm going to move on. Again, this film is Dune. The music for this film is going to be, I think the score is going to be written and composed by Hans Zimmer, which is exciting. So yeah, October 1st, Dune. Moving on to number 14 on the list. Number 14 on the list is Ghostbusters Afterlife. It was originally titled Ghostbusters Legacy and then Ghostbusters From Beyond, but it is, I think the title they're running with now is Afterlife. And so this film is, I believe, a direct continuation of the original 2 Ghostbusters films, ignoring the 2014 reboot. And yeah, I'm going to go through the cast. I don't know much about the premise But Paul Rudd is in this film. That should be very exciting. I love Paul Rudd, Ant-Man. And then Sigourney Weaver, I think, is going to be bringing back her initial role. Um, I guess the big names, which I don't know what the film is going to really discuss or talk about. I'm pretty sure it has to do with the death of one of the original members of the Ghostbusters. But the big portion of the film, although they're not on the marquee as the stars, is the return of Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray. And I was kind of beating around the bush, thinking of how to voice that, how to talk about that. Um, but I mean, straight up, that's I think what people are excited for. Yeah, it has a young cast that looks cool. It has Paul Rudd, who everyone loves, and Sigourney Weaver is, one of the original queens of science fiction alongside Carrie Fisher. And J.K. Simmons apparently is going to be in this film. But what people are here to see, they're here to see Bill Murray as Dr. Peter Venkman and Dan Aykroyd as Dr. Ray Stantz. That's it. I love Dan Aykroyd. Um, Obviously, I love the Blues Brothers. That's, again, one of my favorite films of all time. I'm thinking about doing my top 10 or top 20 all-time favorite films list, and Blues Brothers is on there for, Dan Aykroyd and his chemistry um, with John Belushi. So, yeah, I don't really know about this film. I assume that it's the grandchildren of, I think it's Ego, maybe? I'm not exactly sure how it works, but essentially, let's see if I can. Egon, sorry, I pronounced his name incorrectly. Harold Ramis, who played Egon Spengler, he was one of the scientists in the group, one of the four original Ghostbusters, and he passed away in real life. And I think that was sort of a part of where this film went, the direction it went. And so the actor who portrayed Egon passed away. And this film, I believe, is about his family, I guess, finding his old equipment, unleashing some sort of portal to the afterlife, welcoming back a bunch of ghosts to the mortal realm. And then the kids, I guess his grandkids, Paul Rudd and Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray are going to fight these ghosts. Who are you going to call? I think that Dan Aykroyd has a lot of say in this film. He's definitely a creative mind, and so I think it's in good hands. But again, this is on my list of most anticipated films, but I think that you can sense my hesitation just because of the intellectual property that it's dealing with, and sort of the coupling or the mixing of the original Ghostbusters 1 and 2 from the 80s, along with, seeing these old characters on sort of are they going to ride off into the sunset, or are they going to set up unnecessary sequels, or is this going to be a trilogy that ignores the reboot and sort of closes the door on the Ghostbuster series because they're at an age where, the original Ghostbusters are passing away, and Bill Murray is not young. And Dan Aykroyd, probably isn't that far behind him. And Dan Aykroyd has already lost, some of his comedic partners. So I don't want this to set up some sort of Ghostbusters universe where it's going to be like, who are these people? Why do we have to go research their connections to the original Ghostbusters? So I'm hesitant, but if it's done well, and if we get to see Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, it should be okay. So that's why it is number 14 on my list. And so moving on to lucky number 13, I put this here. I didn't intend for it to be number 13, like lucky number 13, but it is. This is a film that there's no hesitation whatsoever. Number 13 on my list is Black Widow. Now, Black Widow was originally set to be released in May of 2020. Of course, because of the COVID-19 pandemic and how 2020 was a rough year, May was especially rough, it had to be pushed back. Excuse me. And now we're looking at a release date of May 7th, 2021. Before I get into the film or the character or anything like that, I want to talk about that date. The May release date for Marvel is their big release date. I mean, there's no other way to put it. The early May, first weekend in May release date for Marvel, for Disney, for the MCU is the big release date. That's when they released the Iron Man films. That's when they released, I believe, Civil War, if I'm correct, and that's when they released the Avengers films. All four of the Avengers films. Now, of course, with Infinity War and with Endgame, because of the global hype, and because those films were set to release globally sooner than they were set to be released in the United States, and Disney was worried about people pirating the film to see it early in the United States, they did bring back the release date so that it was actually released in late April instead of early May. But that May release date, that spot, is where they put their top projects. That's the marquee projects right there. That's the big dogs. The Iron Man series and the Avengers series. If any film pretty much featuring Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, his portrayal of Tony Stark, was placed in the May release date. And so moving on from that, this film is actually set to have an appearance. I don't know if it's necessarily a cameo, but I know that it is recycled footage that was unused that they're going to be putting into this film because of the time period of which it takes place, of Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, Iron Man. Apparently, it will also feature, I think, footage from of Captain America, Chris Evans, Captain America, Steve Rogers, and perhaps Tom Holland's Peter Parker Spider-Man. Because the film takes place after the events of Captain America Civil War. And when the Avengers went their separate ways until they were reunited at the time of Avengers Infinity War, with that glorious train station sequence where Vision was impaled and Captain Rogers shows up as the Nomad with his amazing beard and sick haircut and his darkened suit. But that's not important. So because this film was set to be sort of a grand send-off of Scarlett Johansson's Natasha Romanoff Black Widow, and because this film features footage of Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark Iron Man, it was placed in that May spot. And thankfully, they kept that. They stayed true to that and just simply pushed it up a year. As I said, this is sort of her send-off, but it's actually a connecting story. And it features, it is directed by how do I pronounce her name? Kate Shortland. I assume it's not pronounced Shortland. Kate Shortland, produced by Kevin Feige, based off of the works of Stan Lee and Don Rico, and starring Scarlett Johansson as Natasha Romanoff. I'm not too sure of the premise. I know that it takes place following the events of Captain America Civil War. Black Widow is alone, and she has to sort of face her demons. There's some sort of villainary force after her, which I think is the Taskmaster. And I don't really know the story of the Taskmaster so much, but I know that she will be teaming up with a number of either former Soviet operatives or Russian operatives that were from where she's from, including a portrayal of the Red Guardian, which is essentially the Soviet Union's version of Captain America, which is super exciting. But yeah, there are other Black Widows apparently, not just Scarlett Johansson's character. I don't know how that's going to affect the Marvel Universe and the multiverse moving forward, but I'm excited for Scarlett Johansson to have her time in the spotlight because the original 6 Avengers are very important to me. As you know, I have the tattoo on my right arm, and the Black Widow symbol is a part of that. So, good for her. I love the MCU. I'm super excited. Yeah. let's move on. So what was that, number 13? So we're going to move on to number 12. Number 12 on this list is sort of shifting gears, is, well, I'm just going to have to say it, The Suicide Squad. So that's right. I moved on from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is very near and dear to me, to the DC Extended Universe, or whatever they call it these days. This film, I don't think that it is. Apparently, it's a sequel to the original Suicide Squad, which was created and directed by David Ayer. Again, I don't know much about this film, and a lot of the characters are pretty random, it appears. It's somehow connected to the extended universe. Maybe it has to deal with the events following Snyder's Justice League. But what I really want to focus on is the director of this film, James Gunn. So James Gunn, of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, directed the Guardians of the Galaxy films. So he directed Guardians 1 and Guardians 2. And then, because of a number of tweets that arose from a decade ago, over a decade ago, that made some insensitive comments, he was fired from Marvel Studios, from Disney altogether. It was crazy. I remember the day I was at my grandma's house when it happened, and I checked my phone, and it just said James Gunn fired. And I was like, what the hell? There were maybe, half a dozen tweets that made some insensitive jokes, blue collar jokes. It was nothing too crazy. They weren't racial. He didn't use any sort of racial or bigoted language, but they were inappropriate comments, jokes that honestly myself and my classmates and my friends were probably making at that same time. But of course, we were, freshmen, sophomores in high school, and this gentleman was a professional. And without any sort of process, they just fired him. They said, Disney doesn't stand for this. We don't want any connection to this. And they've been pretty good about that recently. And of course, this really spawned a big conversation about cancel culture, which is really just dealing with the consequences of your actions. So it's more like consequential culture, but nobody wants to talk about that. But moving on, James Gunn was fired, and almost immediately, as if they were waiting for it, Warner Brothers jumped on this opportunity. Warner Brothers they probably had a burner. I bet that the Warner Brothers studios had a burner account, and they were the ones digging for the tweets. They were like, oh man, we're going to get him fired because Disney ain't going to play this shit. And then immediately, I think in the same day, he was hired by Warner Brothers Pictures and the DC studio. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on here? And of course, all of the Guardians, all of the Avengers, the Marvel cast, Marvel Studios was like, hey, let him apologize. Let things cool down in the media. Let the people who are apparently upset about this, for whatever reason, that they decided to dig up tweets from 10, 15 years ago, let them calm down and let him apologize. We'll apologize for overreacting, and we'll bring him back. It was just a spur of the moment, heat of passion firing. And Warner Brothers said, oop, snooze, you lose, move your feet, lose your seat. And they immediately signed him to make this film. And I was like, holy shit, what is going on? And then, of course, I should have known, I think it was some of the postings by Chris Pratt and Dave Bautista. Things weren't really as they seemed. So I think Disney and Marvel Studios realized that they had made a mistake. Kevin Feige, I assume, was very influential in this. And I assume that Kevin Feige went up to, what's her name? Kathleen Kennedy? Is she in charge of, or it was Bob Iger at the time, was the head of Disney. And he probably said, listen, I have this vision for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I've had this vision for over a decade, and I have visions of the future going into the next decade and the decade after that. I have a 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 film franchise vision of Marvel Comics on the big screen, and James Gunn has been a part of that for the previous decade, and he is going to be significant and influential and necessary moving forward, and we need him back. He didn't say anything too crazy. He made some inappropriate jokes. He apologized. Everyone wants him back. People overreacted. We need him back. And when Kevin Feige speaks, you listen. And they brought him back. And I was kind of nervous about this because, they have non-comp agreements. They have non-disclosure agreements. It's hard to be directing films at two competing studios that do almost the exact same thing. Okay, I won't say that. They do things with almost the exact same purpose. Of course, Marvel does it better. But no, they brought him back. Bob Iger, Kevin Feige welcomed James Gunn back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe family. He's set to direct a Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special for Disney Plus, and then film Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which I'm pretty sure jumps right off of Thor Love and Thunder, which is the fourth Thor film, which features the Guardians of the Galaxy since Thor left Avengers Endgame on the Benatar with the Guardians. And so this film is directed by James Gunn, who apparently has the blessing of Disney, which is insane. And the cast of the film is pretty great. I know I've spent a lot of time on this film. I'm just going to run down through the cast so we can move on. But again, this is important. The film that we know stars Margot Robbie, who's reprising her role as Harley Quinn, which everyone's excited for. Idris Elba, who, I know him from The Office. That's Charles Minor. For years, I had this hatred of Idris Elba because I hate Charles Minor. I hate Charles Minor. But Idris Elba is great. Most people don't know that he actually started out as a DJ on the streets of the United Kingdom. Moving on from there, you're not going to see him, but John Cena is on this list. That joke didn't really come off like I wanted it to. Anyway, Rick Flag will be portrayed by Joel Kinnaman yet again. He's reprising that role. Sylvester Stallone, Viola Davis as Amanda Waller. Viola Davis is one of the greatest actors of all time. This film also stars Pete Davidson, who is known from Saturday Night Live, which I'm a big fan of. David, I'm going to kill this name. David Dasmalchian is one of Ant-Man's friends in the Ant-Man film franchise. He's the one who says the Baba Yaga when he sees Ghost. He's in the film. He plays the Polka Dot Man. Michael Rooker of the MCU. He played Yondu, Star-Lord's dad. He's in this film as well. And the list goes on and on. Sean Gunn, who is the brother of James Gunn, plays the Weasel, who is a anthropomorphic... I think I said that correctly. It doesn't matter. He plays a weasel. He looks like a weasel, similar to how he does the movements for Rocket Raccoon, even though Bradley Cooper does the voice. It should be noted, again, another Office plug. As I said, I hated Idris Elba because I hate Charles Minor. Sean Gunn and James Gunn are close friends with Jenna Fisher. I think that they grew up together or from the same area. And I think the three of them moved out to Hollywood together to begin their careers in entertainment. So the Gunn family and Jenna Fisher, who plays Pam Beesly on The Office, they're sort of interconnected, and the success of their careers grew together. So that's just something to throw in there. I'm excited for this film. I think that everyone is mostly excited for the big-ass shark. King Shark is the character's name. I'm not sure of the actor who portrays this shark. It's a big-ass great white with arms and legs. It walks around. He seems goofy. He smiles a cute, 300-tooth smile. He's adorable. And pardon my French, he's fucking adorable. It's a huge great white shark walking around. Who wouldn't want to see that? So yeah. Moving on from there, because I can't get enough... We're 15, 14, 13, 12. This is number 11. I had to count, sorry. Number 11 on this list, before we go to another break, I know this is a long segment, I apologize. Number 11 on the list is Space Jam: A New Legacy. also known as Space Jam 2. Now, anyone who knows me, and anyone who was born in the 80s and 90s, should have this film on their list. Space Jam is a classic. It is one of, if not the greatest sports films of all time. It's one of, if not the greatest animated films of all time. And it features the second greatest basketball player in history. And lucky enough, Space Jam: A New Legacy features the greatest basketball player in history. So that's great. What a great step up from Michael Jordan to LeBron James. It's like, hey, how can we improve upon the original Space Jam, which was a masterpiece that came out in 1996? They said, why don't we find the only basketball player better than Michael Jordan? LeBron James, the king. And I knew that this film was in the works for a long time. LeBron signed a large deal with the studio when he did Trainwreck. So this was Warner Brothers Pictures. He did Trainwreck with Amy Schumer. And they said that he signed up for a number of films. Everyone assumed that this was it. And at that same time, the Jordan brand started bringing out their Space Jam collection. It's been in the works for a while. But yeah, what can I say? Space Jam, one of the greatest films ever made, one of the most timely films ever made, because it was made at the perfect time between the three-peats, and now we have it with LeBron James. We need this. So this film is apparently directed by a Mr. Malcolm Lee. It's produced by Ryan Coogler, again, of Black Panther. It's also produced by LeBron James himself. It is based on the Looney Tunes characters by Warner Brothers Studios. It's starring LeBron James, the greatest basketball player of all time, which I'm super excited for. I love LeBron. I love everything about LeBron. It also stars Don Cheadle. Don Cheadle? I mean, that's War Machine. You know what I mean? That is Captain James Rhodes. That is Rhodey. That is the War Machine. So we have LeBron James, the best basketball player of all time, coupled with Captain James Rhodes, the second best ironclad character in the MCU. Perfect. This film is set to be released on July 16th of this year. I'm super excited for that. I'm going to, I guess watch it online. The budget for this film is a staggering $161.9 million. I think that they made it that instead of saying 162, just so there's a 6-9, because nice. I assume the premise is similar to the original Space Jam. LeBron James, whether it's him as a kid who wants to grow up to be a superstar, or whether it's his son, Bronny, who wants to grow up to be a superstar. Some crazy shit happens. It looks like they're not being sucked into the Looney Tunes world. It looks like they're being sucked into some sort of virtual Looney Tunes world. I don't know how that's going to work, but yeah. And I have to mention the other characters, the other people that are going to be in this film. Additionally, this film will feature Klay Thompson of the Golden State Warriors, which, I like Klay. I wish him the best with his recovery from his injuries. It also features Anthony Davis, the best defensive player in the league, teammates with LeBron. It also features Damian Lillard, Cash Money Dame, of the Portland Trailblazers, so that's exciting. He's probably going to shoot a dagger in this film, or unless they steal his powers, in which case that alien monster is going to be dangerous. It also features Chris Paul. I'm not sure who Chris Paul plays for anymore. Last time what I remember off the top of my head, he played for Houston, but I don't know if that's the case still. Chris Paul is most notable to all of you in the commercials for State Farm with Oscar from The Office. And then Kyle Kuzma, who I think also played for the Lakers. It also features some players from the WNBA. And then, most significantly, the most important character in this film, Lola Bunny. That's it. Lola Bunny is the best character, probably one of the best things to come out of the original Space Jam, besides the Space Jam song. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Damian Lillard, and Lola Bunny? That's a dangerous team right there. They'd still probably lose game 1, but that's okay. Doesn't matter. So yeah, that is Space Jam 2, Space Jam: A New Legacy. That was number 11 on my list. We're going to take a short break. I need it. I'm sure that you need it. And then we'll get into the top 10 most anticipated films of 2021. I want to thank everyone for listening up to this point. I'm having a good time. I hope that you're having a good time. And remember, Lola Bunny is going to be on the same court as LeBron James. That's insane. Anyway, we'll be right back. This is Late Nights with Lance. Thank you.